So this is the new ROG Phone 7 Ultimate. This is the best gaming phone that you can buy right now. That's it. That's the video. You can go now. Okay. Maybe don't leave just yet because I want to discuss a big but. Not that kind, you perverse minds. B-U-T but. There's no extra T. Anyway, stay tuned with me till the end of the video and let's talk a little bit more about the ROG Phone 7 and Phone 7 Ultimate. If you're here for the very first time, I'm Arshad. You're watching Trakin Tech English. Let's go. Okay. To start off with, ROG Phone 7 and Phone 7 Ultimate are the two SKUs that ASUS has launched. Now, the Phone 7 comes with 12GB of RAM, 256GB of storage, and the Ultimate comes with 16GB of RAM and 512GB of storage. Obviously, it also leverages the power of the new Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 and its LPDDR5X RAM plus UFS 4.0 storage, because there is no 128GB variant, because then you would have had UFS 3.1 storage. And unsurprisingly, the ROG Phone 7 Ultimate obliterates the competition when it comes to benchmarks and gaming performance. We got the best Antutu score of every single Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 phone that we've tested in 2023. We also got the best Geekbench 6 score. And we ran the 3D Mark Wildlife stress test and we got a stability score of 97.5%. That's just nuts. All this is thanks to the X mode, or the performance mode, that's there on the ROG Phone 7 Ultimate. And if you think X mode is not enough, you can attach this AeroActive 7 cooler that you get inside the box of the ROG Phone 7 Ultimate, and you can switch on X mode plus. By the way, I must mention, if you buy the ROG Phone 7, you will have to buy this accessory separately. So with this attachment, you get a default frosty mode to cool the phone down and get sustained performance as well. And if you want to go even more bonkers, attach this to a power source with a USB cable and you can switch on the frozen mode for even better cooling. Now, like I mentioned, this is basically for gamers who play games for long sessions, so they want sustained performance without the phone heating up, and that's possible with the AeroActive Cooler 7. And for gamers who prefer short bursts of gaming like I do, for them, the internal vapor cooling chamber, which is a massive chamber, should suffice. By the way, this AeroActive cooler uses a Peltier element to actually cool down the device, and this is the only, accessory with Peltier element available in the market that doesn't require an external source of power for it to work. But you know what? The story doesn't end there. You of course have physical trigger buttons on the AeroActive cooler so that you can configure it in your favorite games. And this is apart from the air triggers, which can also be configured in so many different ways when you're gaming. Wait for it, there's even more. ASUS added an extra subwoofer on the AeroActive cooler so that you can get an extended low-end response when you're playing music or of course playing games. Now, if you've come this far, give us your support, hit that subscribe button and the bell icon right next to it to get notified whenever we put out an awesome new tech video. You of course get two separate front-firing speakers which work in a stereo setup, and they use Cirrus Logic's most powerful mono amplifiers out there. And even with that setup, the ROG Phone 7 Ultimate sounds super detailed, and when you add this subwoofer and make it a 2.1 setup, oh my god, it's just madness. You know what, if you don't believe me, just take a listen to the sound once without the cooler and once with the cooler right next to the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra, and you'll know what I'm talking about. And unlike most flagship phones, actually almost every single flagship phone out there, the ROG Phone 7 Ultimate also has a headphone jack with support for high-res audio, 24-bit 192 kHz audio. And you get high-res wireless audio support, which includes support for LDAC plus Snapdragon sound support as well. Thank you, ASUS. Thank you for making a phone for just us nerds and listening to what we want. Now, coming back to the gaming performance on the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, we ran a perf dog test, and in Call of Duty Mobile, we got an average FPS of 120.5. So you can play the game at medium settings and 120 frames consistently. In fact, even the Xiaomi 13 Pro can achieve that, but not as consistent as the ROG Phone 7 Ultimate. Of course, this is the best gaming phone out there. In a more demanding title like Genshin Impact, we got a consistent FPS of 60.4. I mean, what more could you ask for? Now, here's the thing though, when you're playing these games for long duration, you might see that the armory crate is showing you a very high temperature, but trust me, the heat is getting dissipated out of the body and the phone doesn't feel hot or warm at all. Plus, I'm bringing back the AeroActive Cooler 7 into the discussion because now this has a mechanism with which it can actually cool down the display as well. Even the display doesn't feel hot. And exclusively on the ROG Phone 7 Ultimate, you get this black aluminum, cutout. I'll tell you what that is. It's called AeroActive Portal, which was first introduced on the ASUS ROG Phone 6D Ultimate. By the way, if you want to save some money, the ROG Phone 6 is still a very good phone, and I'll add a product buying link down below. Go and check it out and maybe pick it up from there. This is basically an extra pathway that opens up and has thin heat dissipation fans, and it gets connected or attached to the AeroActive cooler for even better cooling of the internal components, because then there is free airflow to those components. And as for the crank slider mechanism that this aluminum part uses, ASUS is confident that it will last a long time. And in any case, it only gets activated when you connect the AeroActive cooler. This is really engineering at its best because it works in the background and it does its job very well. So we've established best gaming performance further enhanced because Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 itself is very good. And of course, you get support for ray tracing as well. But to keep gaming for long, you actually get a large split cell 6000 mAh battery inside it, which is also present on the ROG Phone 6, Phone 5, all of those. Now the phone supports up to 65 watt charging, but you get only a 30 watt charger in the box, both on the ROG Phone 7 and the Phone 7 Ultimate, which is a bit of a letdown because at least the Ultimate should have come with a 65 watt charger in the box. Now I tried my StuffCool 65 watt charger to charge the 6000 mAh battery, and it took slightly less than 1 hour to charge from 0 to 100. As for the battery performance, this is the best battery life that you can get from a flagship phone in 2023. 2 days battery is easy if you actually use it in balanced mode. And even with my very heavy usage where I was using X mode for a lot of time because I was testing games out on it, and I got about 10 hours of screen on time. Incredible stuff, ASUS. And a good chunk of the reason why the battery life is so good is also because of Snapdragon 8 Gen 2's power efficiency. But this is where I wanted to highlight the big but that I alluded to at the start of the review. There is so much power on tap here, especially on the ROG Phone 7 Ultimate. But what's the use of all that power if you can't put it to good use? Because devs are here, shutting down good games like Apex Legends and shelving projects like Battlefield. And you know that the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 supports ray tracing. It was introduced last year, and there's not a single game on Android right now which supports ray tracing. So it's just there, but of no use. All that power that's out here is basically for future proofing, and I really hope that brands like ASUS, OnePlus, and Samsung work very closely with developers to make good games and not leave us gamers stranding. Hashtag give us more games. Anyway, all that visual delight that you get from games is displayed on this large 6.78 inch AMOLED panel with 165 Hz refresh rate at the top end and a touch sampling rate of 720 Hz. Plus the response time is as low as 1 milliseconds, which is of course, as gamers know, very important for gaming. But there's one thing that I need to highlight, that this is not an LTPO panel. Yes, you can switch between 6090, 120, 144 and 165 on the fly depending on what you want. But the base that it goes to is 60 Hz when you're, using it in auto mode. In auto mode, what I noticed is that it only touched a maximum of 120 Hz. Even with X mode on, I think you have to switch on 165 Hz to keep it running at 165 Hz. But honestly, the difference between 120 Hz and 165 Hz is barely perceptible. So keep it in auto mode because you'll at least get better battery life. Anyway, just like the ROG Phone 6, this display is also protected by Corning's Gorilla Glass Victus. And you know what? I really want to highlight one thing out here, and that's something that I don't generally talk about, and that is the reviewer's guide that ASUS shared with us. Most brands do share a reviewer's guide of their new device that they're going to launch, and in that it gives you some basic information, some extra information, and mostly just marketing speak. But ASUS goes beyond, above and beyond, and gave us a 40-page long document with so much detailed information that would make any tech nerd go bonkers. Because that's when I realized the display can reach a peak brightness of 1000 nits at APL 100 and a peak brightness of 1500 nits at APL 1. APL 100 means 100% of the display area which is getting bright, and APL 1 means 1% of the display area that gets bright, and that means we're talking about peak brightness in HDR videos, especially when you're playing back on Netflix and YouTube. Now, this is the kind of information that most brands do not tell you. They tell you, okay, the peak brightness of the phone is 1300 nits, 1800 nits, but that's only during HDR. What about when you're just using it with auto brightness mode? Having said that, 1500 nits is the peak brightness that's possible on the ROG Phone 7 Ultimate's display, which is of course lower than the Xiaomi 13 Pro and the Galaxy S23 Ultra. Regardless, the delta E is less than 1. It's a very color accurate display. It's one of the best panels that I've used, and in this price range, it's very, very good. Yes, you do not get QHD resolution, but I take that for better gaming and good battery life. Now let's talk about the design. The design is largely unchanged except for the backing panel, which now has a two-tone finish. On the ROG Phone 7 Ultimate that we have, the two-tone finish is not immediately apparent, but it's like a clear white and sort of a muddy white that's going on out here. And the texture is also slightly different as a result. In comparison, on the ROG Phone 7, you get two variants, one in black color and one in white color. And over there, the two-tone finish is, immediately apparent. Now, one good change on the ROG Phone 7 series is that the IP rating has been bumped up to IP54 from IPX4, which means that now you also get dust protection. Now, on the ROG Phone 7, there's something called an ROG Vision, which is basically an illuminated logo. But on the ROG Phone 7 Ultimate, you get a PMOLED display on the rear, and it can do this when you're switching on the phone, when you switch on X mode, you get the drift. But honestly, it feels like a vanity metric and doesn't really serve any purpose because you're going to be looking at the display and not really at the PMOLED display on the rear. Now, this is a big and heavy phone that's established because all ROG phones are generally big and heavy, but the ergonomics have been maintained really well thanks to the curved backing panel and the really nice soft touch finish of the railing itself. And on the ROG Phone 7 Ultimate, I really like the blue accents that are running around. You get this blue accent on the SIM card tray and then on the primary camera ring as well. Looks cool. By the way, the SIM card tray doesn't support SD cards, which is a bit of a letdown because gaming phones generally need to support SD cards, but that's not possible on the ROG Phone 7 Ultimate. And talking about the camera, well, this is a gaming phone, so I don't need to talk too much about it. But then again, I tested it out because I love doing that. So the ROG Phone 7 Ultimate has a 50 megapixel Sony IMX766 sensor, a 13 megapixel ultra wide and 8 megapixel macro camera, and a 32 megapixel selfie camera on the front. The primary camera in good even lighting conditions in daylight captures really good pictures. The color science is especially near accurate and close to natural, and that surprised me a lot. Even in low light, it doesn't have to expose for long because the sensor is pretty capable and can let in enough light, and the low light shots with night mode on do look very good. Now, problem with the camera performance is that ASUS hasn't spent too much time optimizing the camera algorithm for good multi-stack processing. While HDR correction is good, it is sometimes erratic where it crushes the shadows and blows out the highlights. In portrait mode, the edge detection and bokeh drop-off is fantastic, but the skin tones go for a toss and the colors go for a toss too. And when you talk about the ultra-wide angle camera, it's a sharp ultra-wide angle camera, but the colors captured are oversaturated compared to the primary camera. Anyway, selfies do look very good though. Again, the skin tones are what took me by surprise. The 8MP macro camera doesn't have a very close focusing distance, but can achieve decent shots when handled with patience. Now, with the primary camera, you can shoot up to 8K 24fps videos, but I tested 4K 60fps, and the video quality is good, and so is the sound recording because the mics actually pick up a lot of sound and the environmental noise correction works well. Now, you do not have OIS, but you do get EIS for stabilization, and the stabilization is very, very good. You get standard stabilization, but there's also a hyper steady mode which you can activate at 1080p resolution at 60 fps as well. In fact, you can also shoot hyper-stable videos at up to 1080p 60 fps, and those hyper-stable videos literally look like they've been shot using a gimbal. But the front camera tops out at 1080p 30 fps only. You do get electronic image stabilization, but there is a lot of crop factor involved, so it crops out a lot of the picture, and there is a possibility that your face could get cropped out too. Now, overall, you shouldn't be disappointed with the cameras on the ROG Phone 7 or the Phone 7 Ultimate, but it's not meant to be a camera phone, so it's not the best camera phone. It gets the job done. Now, software-wise, you get two kinds of experience. One is the ROG experience, which is garish and over the top and gamery, for a lack of better word. Or you can also switch on to the stock Androidish clean mode, which is what I prefer. Even with stock Androidish look, you do not have to lose out on the gaming elements, which is Armory Crate and Game Genie. Armory Crate is pretty useful for gamers, and it has a lot of options. That's where you can switch on the X mode or the balance mode, or the low power mode that is also available. And you can also tweak those individual settings to suit your needs as well. But one thing I liked about Armory Crate specifically is that it recommends games, and it recommends games based on the maximum refresh rate that those can achieve. So you can actually switch between 165, 144, 120 to see which of these games support that particular refresh rate, which is very useful, which is something that we keep searching for on Play Store to figure out and keep downloading to understand if which game actually supports high refresh rates. But ASUS makes that easier for you with Armory Crate. But one thing I noticed is that the listing is a little weird because certain games do not run at the 165 frames per second despite it being listed there. Now, one concern that I would like to raise out here is that that ASUS only promises 2 years of software updates and 4 years of security updates. Now, this is a flagship phone. It should have had at least 3 years is what you would want or what I would want as the end consumer. But what ASUS says is that if there is a new software update that comes out, then they have to change a lot of things, a lot of codes internally. Of course, you have to change that for the software that's bundled inside, but also for the attachment accessories. So I think I understand ASUS out here. Also, I'm giving ASUS the benefit of doubt primarily because the ASUS ROG Phone 6 and the Phone 6 Pro have already gotten Android 13 in February itself. So at least they are, delivering good on the promise of Android updates. So hopefully that will happen with the ROG Phone 7 as well. And 4 years of security updates should at least have you worry free. But you guys tell me in the comments, are you okay with that move or you want more software updates in the comment section below. At the time of shooting this video, I don't have the exact price of the phone, but the ROG Phone 7 vanilla variant should start at about 70,000. This one will of course be more expensive because you also get bundled accessories within the box itself. The box itself is quite an experience, I must say. And for the unboxing, I'd suggest you watch the Trakin Tech Hindi channel. Arun has already done one, so go and check out the link here. So let's get down to the point. Is the ROG Phone 7 Ultimate the best gaming phone you can buy? Yes, and I've said that multiple times over the course of the video. But we need more games to push the hardware. Imagine if the ROG Phone 7 Ultimate had exclusives like the Nintendo Switch or the PS5 or the Xbox Series X. Then the number of folks actually wanting to buy the phone would multiply by quite a bit, I would believe. Do you agree with that point or not? Let me know in the comment section below. I really like this gaming phone, like I've always liked it in the past as well. So that's it from me. This is Ershad signing off. I'll see you guys in the next one. Keep tracking and stay safe.